Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome this evening's guest moderator from the Museum of the Moving Image, David Schwartz, and tonight's guest, Academy Award-winning actor Robert Duvall.
Okay. Well, I'm very honored to be here with you, and I love this new movie. Could you, I guess just to start off with, tell us a little bit about the character that you play, Red Bovee, in this film?
Yeah, well, Red Bovee, pretty interesting character. He was started about 30 years ago by Bill Whitliff, a wonderful Texas writer, who also wrote the screenplay, the teleplay for Lonesome Dove from the great novel by McMurtry. And he had this already, but we waited many, many years to get this off the ground. But it's almost as if this character, Red Bovee, is a descendant of those guys from Lonesome Dove. And is a character I always wanted to play. And it took a long time to get it off the ground. Dennis Hopper was going to direct it, then a French guy was going to direct it, and then now was it was now or never. And a Spanish guy showed up, Emilio Aragon, with a full crew and the money to do it in Brownsville, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley. So we did it in only 23 days. It took him about 35 years to get it off the ground. We had 23 days. So it was a lovely movie to make and a lot of fun. And the young woman, Angie Cepeda, is from Colombia. They tracked her down from Madrid to play the Mexican. She's a wonderful actor. Her first American movie. And the young man that played my grandson is Jeremy
Irvine was the young actor. Yeah.
And Joaquin Cosio, a wonderful stage actor from Mexico City, played in it, and certain actors from Spain. It was a wonderful experience working 23 days. We had to cram it in, but it was wonderful working on this character. Titus Red Bovee was his name.
So it's a character who is aged. So I read somewhere that you said you wanted to age, wait 25 years so you could be old enough to play the character.
Yeah, well, when we finished Lonesome Dove, Whitliff said to me, "Now we should do, A Night in Old Mexico." I said, "No, it's too soon. We got to wait. I got to get a little older." So we did, and it was an interesting journey. It's interesting because Whitliff can be difficult to work with, great writer. But so what he did was he kept putting snags in the road, and finally, about a week before we start to film, he said he's going to pull the plug on it for whatever reasons, technical reasons. So Rob Carliner, one of the producers, I said, "You go to Whitliff and tell him this." And he said, "If you pull the plug on this movie, it'll be more heartbreaking for Bobby Duvall, to not do this movie than it would be for Red Bovee to lose his ranch within the movie." So he said, "I get it." So then we went into full production. It was greenlit, and we went from there.
And it was, from what I understand, it was really done like an old-fashioned independent film. You had very low budget. You only had a few weeks.
Absolutely, 23 days. That was it. We went down there, and semi-guerrilla filmmaking on the run. It was a great experience. Sometimes when you work fast, you can only have a chance for 2 or 3 takes. Yeah. It's better. I just did a film with Robert Duvall. We had 60 days to do it. And, sometimes it's just your energy dissipates. It's better the compact thing of having to work fast sometimes is very beneficial, I think. So 23 days can be okay sometimes. It was fine with Emilio directing, and I love working in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas, right there, Matamoros, right across from Mexico.
And what is it like when you're doing a film? The thing I think that's the hallmark of your acting is that it's like you really do become this other person. I mean, I know that's the goal of acting, but you seem to just really transform in a very, like the character takes over somehow. So how does that work for you?
Well, I think the transformation is a legitimate word, but it's also going to become an illegitimate word because it always has to be you doing it.
Right.
Turned in a certain way, as if you become another character, which you kind of do, but it has to be you. You only have one set of emotions, one psyche, one temperament, and sometimes you become another character. If that's done cerebrally, then it could be off. It's got to come from you, from your whole human infrastructure, so to speak. So that's what character acting is about. I love to do different characters, whether it be this guy or when I play Joseph Stalin, where I played a Cuban barber with Richard Harris, whether I played Adolf Eichmann, good guys, bad guys. I played Robert E. Lee in a movie, The Great General, that led the Confederacy. So you have to find in you what that character calls for and turn it as if it's that character. It is that character, but it's still you masked, so to speak.
Yeah. So what was it about Red that you embraced that really meant a lot to you? Because this is
Well, it was not a difficult journey because I through the years I'd liked this character and I just followed the writing.
Yeah.
Once in a while you improvise, but if the writing is really, really good, you don't need to improvise. But I love to improvise when called for. But the script is so good. For instance, he had lines like Amarita or Amarilla, and I had a Mexican guy come up that really happened to Whitliff. Give me $1, watch me cut myself. He had the cut marks all over. And all these different sayings from Texas. And the music, dos juntos, means two sides. The Mexican side and the Texas side, music blended, is a wonderful, wonderful type of music that was evident in the movie. So many, many kind of ingredients go into it that made me love this character, and I just felt that all I had to do was follow the text, so to speak. And I did improvise one line at the end that gave me a tremendous emotional thing. I said, it was nice to see this. You're a man now to my grandson, and I had a new lady love that I found. My life has been turned around. And I said, I found all this, and I said, and I found me a grandson. Yeah. And when I said that word, Whitliff said, I wish I'd have thought of that line. Because I had a truly very deeply emotional moment that was totally unplanned.
Yeah.
And just happened out of the blue.
Wow. Well, he can take credit for it, but we know the truth now. So we have a few clips to show. So why don't we look at the first clip and your character's facing, basically living, having to move and live somewhere you don't want to live. So you're about to go off.
Right, they're right to take me to an old age home because I lost my little ranch, my little humble ranch, on a foreclosure to the bank, and they're taking me off. I find that I have a grandson on that day that I never knew I had because my son had left me, my wife had left me. I didn't even know I had a grandson until this day. And the lady that kind of oversaw the selling of the farm, the ranch, is taking me to an old age home.
Okay, so let's run the first clip.
I had a very good stunt driver there. He's a very good driver, good stunt man. Sometimes you do your own stunts, but you had a good driver there that did that actually. Yeah.
You seem to love your. I associate you with so many great westerns you've done. You've never lived in Texas, but you're legend there because of Lonesome Dove.
I spent a lot of time there. Actually, my mother's people were from New Boston, Texas.
Yeah.
I don't know them, but I spent time. But when I was a kid at the end of World War II, I was young, and my brothers and I spent 2 summers on my uncle's big cattle and sheep ranch in northern Montana. And I think that's what gave me an interior to be able to do these parts, the beginnings of it at least, to do westerns. Yeah. Horses. I like to do my own riding and all my own horse work, all my own singing, and all my own dancing in movies. And so I am drawn to westerns, and I do like Texas a lot. I do. It's like a separate country, really, Texas.
Yeah, and you had the luck of working with John Wayne on True Grit. I mean, what was that like? I think
it was nice. It was great working with John Wayne. It's a different kind of filmmaking then. I'm not enamored with some of the old filmmakers. That director said to Glenn Campbell, the actor, at one point, he said, "When I say action, tense up, goddammit."
Henry Hathaway.
You don't do that with. You can imagine doing that to Joe Montana in the Super Bowl. I mean, you don't. There's a difference between intensity and tenseness, So, but it was nice working with John Wayne, the Duke. He was a very underrated actor because he learned his craft as he went along, and by the time he did the movie The Shootist at the end of his career, I thought it was a wonderful performance. Yeah, it really, really was. But it was nice working on that, and they made a sequel to that and everything. But and Charlie Portis was a wonderful writer from Arkansas. He only wrote 1 or 2 books, really, but he was a wonderful writer, and it was a nice movie to work on, definitely.
So how do you work with directors? Actually, I guess a Spanish director, Emilio Aragon?
Yeah, he's very powerful in Spain. He speaks wonderful English.
Yeah.
And it was fine, and they said, well, what was it like? What was it like in Texas to work with a Spanish director? I said, better a director from Madrid than a hack from Dallas, So, so he was fine to work with,
What I was wondering was, like, how do you sort of build the traits of your character? Like, your character has such a particular way of talking in this movie and a laugh. I mean, he has he's a really gruff character, but like a real sense of humor also. And how do you sort of put together the...
I just follow the logic of the script, really.
Yeah.
I just went with it and let myself be victimized in a good way by the script. I just went with it and didn't intellectualize it too much. I just let it take me.
And
I felt I trusted the material, and I think I pretty much, on the best of days, trusted myself with that material.
Yeah. And do you find that once you're in a character, do you pretty much, I mean, are you the type of actor who stays in character the whole time, or do you turn it on and off pretty easily?
Yeah, I turn it on and off. I mean, I some actors do stay in character all day long. I would think that would be very tiresome, I think once you do something good, then it's all you doing it. It's so you can go relax with your friends and come back, I mean, some scenes are, involve a little bit more, concentration and emotional preparation. But my kind of simplistic form of acting is you start from zero, and you let the process take you to the result rather than going to the result. So I talk, you listen, as we're doing now. You talk, I listen. And that simplicity, to be that simple and that pure, it's not that easy always. Let us see where it takes you. Let us see where it takes you.
Yeah.
And if you're true to that, then you could be rewarded with some surprises around the corner that if you were trying to force it, those surprises might not happen.
Yeah. It's so great to see you in a film where the whole film is really built around your character, and you had one a few years ago, Get Low. Is it hard to find scripts that you want to do? Because we would love to see you in more films.
Well, I've done a lot of things that, it is hard to find good scripts. This was a good one. Get Low is a good one. I like it. Sometimes it's much easier to raise $100 million with a great big name than $5 million or $4 million, a low-budget film. I like certain low-budget films, and I really like to do them, and I've had a pretty good success at doing them. But, if a big film comes along, like the one I've done with Robert Downey Jr., The Judge, we had 60 days to shoot that. So, and, a lot of time wasted, but as I said before, sometimes when you work fast, things happen that don't allow a process of dissipation for things to dissipate like they can do in a big budget film.
We have one more clip, not to give away too much of the story, but your character, instead of going to an old age home, takes off to Mexico to have a good time, and you get into an adventure with a suitcase full of money that you didn't expect to have. So that's all I want to say to set up this scene we're about to see. So let's run the second clip. So that's such a powerful scene. Can you talk about what it's like when you're, there's certain scenes in the film that are just so intense, and
I always try to make sure it comes out of my temperament. So the young actor there, Jeremy from England, had been in the War Horse. He was jumping in on me at the wrong time, and it made me mad. So I said, "Jump in on me any place you want to. Forget about the script." So when he jumped in on me, like unexpectedly, like that jolted me and got my motor going, So I went with it. So you go with the moment. You go with what happens. You don't deny the reality of what's happening at the moment. So I was able to use that within that situation, and it's nice. And I don't know if I said the young lady from Colombia.
Yeah,
that's her first American movie.
Wow.
Her mother was a prosecuting attorney in Bogota. She had to sit behind a curtain when she prosecuted the drug people for safety reasons. And actually, her mother died again. It's her first American. She's very talented, Angie Cepeda. We were lucky to find her. And, as the movie goes on, I won't give it away, we kind of find one another. And going to old Mexico, he finds a new life, a new love, and things turn around for him, that started out very negative. It's kind of a sweet story that way. As we said, it's a yarn, a narrative, a fictional tale.
It's kind of as I was saying before, it's a sort of surprisingly sweet movie. I sort of didn't expect that, but it's
like an old movie, a nice beginning, middle, and an end without too much violence, too much of this or that. Just a nice story that Whitliff came up with. It's a real Texas story.
Yeah.
It could be universal, but it's definitely a Texas story to begin with.
I just want to ask one thing, then we'll take audience questions. But right now we're in a building that used to be a post office, and you used to work at a post office in New York, and you had your early days here acting in New York. So could you just talk about
in between jobs, which were few and far between at the time, you have to take jobs to get along. Dustin Hoffman worked here. Gene Hackman loaded trucks. We had these jobs, and I finally got a good permanent job at the 42nd Street post office. It was good. I never had money in my pocket like that, $100 at a time. I never had money like that. I'd been in the Army. It was terrific, and I really was grateful to have that job. But I said to myself, after 6 months, if I don't quit this job, I'll be here in 20 years. So I quit the job. I had to. And to go back, I had to be semi-destitute because, I had to find my way in the business, and I couldn't do it at the post office.
And you started doing a lot of theater. Did you always want to go into films?
Yeah, well, I did. It's been a while. The last play I did was American Buffalo, David Mamet's play on Broadway that my good friend Ulu Grossbar directed it, and it was a beautiful production that he directed. They say it was the best one yet. And Ulu was great to work with. I did one film with him, with
True Confessions.
True Confessions.
Great movie.
And Ulu died, unfortunately, 2 years ago. He was a dear, dear friend, and I used to do a lot of theater in Long Island and so forth. And but now, I figure some of these parts I do in the movies I could do in theater if I had to. Yeah. Not that I want to do it 8 times a week, but
Well, you had a pretty good first film, this thing called To Kill a Mockingbird.
Absolutely, To Kill a Mockingbird.
That's a pretty good way to start.
Yeah, Horton Foote, the great writer. He and Francis Coppola, we did Godfather 1 and 2 and Apocalypse, and then I wrote a letter to Coppola recently thanking him, saying, you and Horton Foote in my beginnings helped me. The both of them, very, very different in their thrusts. But Horton Foote did that. We did that movie Tomorrow in the black and white that you mentioned.
Yeah, and I just read that there was a survey done recently to pick the greatest speeches in movie history, and the number one greatest speech was "I love the smell of napalm."
I thought it was 13th.
No, it's first.
Yeah, people come up to me and say they knew I said it, and they knew that I said it, and their attitude is that only they and I know that I said it, and nobody else in the world knows it,
Okay, so do we have some questions in the audience? And just wait for the microphone. So.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. So I'm a big fan. I love your old movies. So quickly, my question: you won the Oscar and so many Golden Globes. So where do you keep all statues?
Where do you keep
you got so many statues.
Where do you keep all your awards?
Yeah.
He said you won an Oscar.
Yeah.
He wants to know where you keep all your awards.
Oh, you mean the trophies? I have a few. Yeah, well, we live on a farm in Virginia, the state of Virginia. We love it there. And the Oscars on the mantle. And then I have a letter on the other wall from Marlon Brando. And I almost liked the letter from Marlon Brando more than the Oscar.
You just said that you got a letter from Marlon Brando that meant more to you than the Oscar. That was a letter about the Apostle, right? The movie that you directed.
Exactly, the movie I directed and other things. And it was a wonderful letter that, because coming up, we used to go to Cromwell's drugstore. I don't know if it's there anymore, at 50, Rockefeller Plaza. Myself, Dustin Hoffman, Gene Hackman, we used to meet there and a couple of times a week, and talk. And if we mentioned Brando's name once, we mentioned it 25 times. And like Jimmy Kahn said, if the young actors of that era don't give credit to Brando, they're lying. Because he was like a hero to us. He was like a mentor, you know. And I think it's good to have heroes in your life. You got to have people you look up to, you know, because then you learn and you grow.
Hi. What was your most difficult role to play?
When I played Joseph Stalin on television, we went to Russia and we filmed in the Kremlin. In the Kremlin, nobody had done that before. It was very difficult, you know, to play a Russian guy in English but with a certain accent, and that was very difficult to do because with HBO they weren't well organized, and it was very difficult. But what happened was when it was aired and everything, Nikita Mikhalkov's father, the great Russian director, his father had worked under Stalin 8 times, and Stalin and Nikita Mikhalkov, the father of you know that had worked with Stalin, liked our production a lot, and I guess he liked what I did a lot. So that was like a great review. So it was very difficult to do to go over to a foreign country like that and do that, because that's right when things were changing, and it was. The first day I came out as Stalin, the people like ducked. And then when they served the food, the people weren't used to having good food. They piled bread on top of bread and meat on top of meat, you know, from the caterer. But that was a very rewarding in a strange kind of way, in a negative kind of way, but it's something I always remember as very difficult but pleasing at the same time.
Hello. I first saw you years ago, back in 1980, and I was wondering, how has the film business changed for you since then?
You've been making movies since the 60s, so how have you seen the film business change over the years?
Well, I think it's changed, but it's still the same. All I can say, like, in the 70s was the golden age, so to speak, and that filmmaking, and it's as if the independent films were within the system. And now they're outside the system. Now they make the big blockbuster films, and the smaller films are more difficult to make. But it's still movie making. It's still action. It's still cut. It's the same. It's just the emphasis is different. And there's some famous director said no good movies have been made since the 70s. Well, he hasn't made any good movies since the 70s. I won't mention any names, but they're good movies every year. And the young actors now are as good or better than ever. Because the door is open going into the 21st century. Instead of certain people wanting to be novelists or whatever, they want to be script writers, directors, actors, and the door is open. Look at guys like Denzel Washington, Lawrence Fishburne, guys like that couldn't, and 30 years ago, couldn't get a chance. You have Darín of Argentina, you have Bardem of Spain. All these wonderful young actors, the worldwide, and then you go to a country like Iran, and like the Iranian filmmakers, some of them are very good. They say in Hollywood they make machine-made rugs, machine-made movies. In Iran they made handmade rugs, handmade movies. And if you see a movie called The Apple by a 17-year-old girl in Iran, it's beautiful. So it's a worldwide thing, but in a strange way. Even though we try to get away from it, Hollywood is still kind of the Mecca or a semi-Mecca. You know, people still want to come to this country, even when they don't like us particularly, and work here. So it's changed, but it's still action and cut. It's still let's make believe, let's play house. Let's be like kids and play house, but as adults for money and for whatever, you know. So there'll always be a Hollywood, there'll always be movies, and it's a very in medium, even more than ever, going into the 21st century. For many people, there are many wonderful young actors now. For me, some people disagree, for me, better than ever.
Two things. I notice how well you use certain things like a hat or the car as characters to add to developing your character. Can you talk about that, how you use certain visual characteristics, or like the car is almost like a character in the film? And also I want to hear what your production company is working on next, or working on in maybe theater and such.
Yeah, what if your production company is, any projects that are in the works?
No, production company is no longer. I work independent now more. But you know, when you do a part like this, the hat, and in a western, the horse, the costume is very important. And those things of doing the hat and so forth, they come more intuitively. You don't necessarily plan them out. It just comes with the rhythm of each scene, so to speak. Yeah.
And the car.
The car. It's funny because in this movie, and also in the Downey movie, I drive a Cadillac. I told the director in the Downey movie, I drive a Cadillac. Why don't you change? They didn't change it, so I drive a Cadillac in both movies. But he had this. That was true. Good question, because it's like an extension of the character, the car. It's all he's got left when he heads to Mexico, old Mexico as he calls it, with his newfound grandson. It's interesting because a good friend of mine, Buster Welch, he's in his 80s now. He's one of the all-time great cutting horse riders in Texas. He trained all the cutting horses on the King Ranch for a long time. And he, today, when he talks about going down into old Mexico. The old people talk about old Mexico. It's a kind of a saying, you know, which is interesting. And I think that's where Whitliff got that as the author, thinking in terms of old Mexico.
Do you have any advice for a young actor or actress or writer? Is there anything that you wish you had known when you were starting out?
Well, you know, you always wish you knew certain things better. But for young actors today, I always say when I meet them, always get with a group. You can't act independently. You have to get with a group and kind of work together. And from there, maybe something will branch out for you. Go to a city, New York, Chicago, or whatever, maybe Washington, D.C., L.A., but get with groups that you can kind of rely on, you know, and from there, hopefully maybe a springboard will happen into something on a commercial level.
It was a pretty good idea for you to be roommates with Gene Hackman and Dustin Hoffman. That was a good...
Yeah, way back. Well, I knew Gene. Gene lived downtown with his wife, Faye, and he said, I have this friend coming in town with a shock of black hair. You know, he'd sleep on my floor. It was Dustin Hoffman. And Dustin, myself, my brother, Maurice Stern, who was a cantor, we rented a wonderful railroad apartment, 107th and Broadway. We had great parties. Gene Hackman lived downtown. And I never see those guys. It's crazy because the country's so big, you know, people are all over the place. But whenever I do see them, I pick up right where we left off. Right, you know, it could be 20 years, we still pick, you know. But good guys, talented guys.
I was wondering what it feels like to you to watch yourself in a movie. Or if when you see yourself, like you're clicking along and you see yourself, do you stop? Do you omit it? Or what do you do?
Oh, well, what's it like watching yourself in a movie? Like if you have the TV on and you show up in a movie, do you keep watching it? Or
sometimes I watch, I shift stations as well, you know. It depends, you know, I don't go over my old movies that much, you know, once in a while, yeah.
I think I'm wondering more what it feels like to watch yourself in the movie.
Yeah, what does it feel like for you when you see yourself? And
well, you know, I watch with, you know, now they have the, when you do a movie, they have the playback where never used to have it that way with the naked eye work, but now the directors watch through the box. And if a scene goes well, you know it, and everybody agrees that it's gone well, but I'm superstitious. I figure by the time I walk back to the box, maybe it's not going to be so good after all. So when I watch myself, I just hope that I'm following a sense of truth, talking and listening and talking, and as we are now in a truthful way. And, you know, it's like that's the beginning and the end of it, to be truthful in a set of imaginary circumstances. That's what I try to look for in myself and in other actors as well.
Over here, okay.
Yes, hello. Me and my sister, you know, basically think that the Godfather series is like the best series of feature films. And I thought Tom Hagen was the best character, to me, in my opinion. But my question is, do you find that the older you get, the more harder the roles are for you to choose now?
No, the roles come to you. You go to them. Sometimes they hack. Sometimes you'll plan with a production company or whatever, and you'll be planning something nice, but then something might come from around the corner that surprises you. That's better than anything you're planning. You know, I was fortunate to, in the last part of the 20th century, to be fortunate to be in the two biggest film, aside from Apocalypse Now, which was a wonderful thing, Godfather 1 and 2, and Lonesome Dove. Those two, that was four parts were very different. Actually, Lonesome Dove was my favorite part. I can remember walking into the dining room on Lonesome Dove and saying, "Boys, we're making the Godfather of Westerns." And I think we were, yeah.
Okay. Well, it's such a treat to see you in this role. I think anybody who loves great acting is going to really enjoy this movie and get a lot out of it. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. It's good to be back in New York. Thank you. I'll play for Lonesome Dove from the great novel by McMurtry. And he had this already, but we waited many, many years to get this off the ground. But it's almost as if this character, Red Bovee, is a descendant of those guys from Lonesome Dove. And is a character I always wanted to play. And it took a long time to get it off the ground. Dennis Hopper was going to direct it. Then a French guy was going to direct it. And then now was a time. It was now or never. And a Spanish guy showed up, Emilio Aragon, with a full crew and the money to do it. In Brownsville, working 23 days, we had to cram it in, but it was wonderful working on this character. Titus Red Bovee was his name.
So it's a character who is aged. So I read somewhere that you said you wanted to age, wait 25 years so you could be old enough to play the character.
Yeah, well, when we finished Lonesome Dove, Whitliff said to me, "Now we should do." A Night in Old Mexico. I said, "No, it's too soon. We got to wait. I got to get a little older." So we did, and it was an interesting journey. It's interesting because Whitliff can be difficult to work with. Great writer, but so what he did was he kept putting snags in the road, and finally, about a week before we start to film, he said he's going to pull the plug on it for whatever reasons, technical reasons. So Rob Carliner, one of the producers, I said, "You go to Whitliff and tell him this." And he said, "If you pull the plug on this movie, it'll be more heartbreaking for Bobby Duvall, to not do this movie than it would be for Red Bovee to lose his ranch within the movie." So he said, "I get it." So then...
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome this evening's guest moderator from the Museum of the Moving Image, David Schwartz, and tonight's guest, Academy Award-winning actor Robert Duvall.
Okay. Well, I'm very honored to be here with you, and I love this new movie. Could you, I guess just to start off with, tell us a little bit about the character that you play, Red Bovee, in this film?
Yeah, well, Red Bovee, pretty interesting character. He was started about 30 years ago by Bill Whitliff, the wonderful Texas writer, who also wrote the screenplay, the Texas in the Rio Grande Valley. So we did it in only 23 days. It took him about 35 years to get it off the ground. We had 23 days. So it was a lovely movie to make and a lot of fun. And the young woman, Angie Cepeda, is from Colombia. They tracked her down from Madrid to play the Mexican. She's a wonderful her first American movie. And the young man that played my grandson is Jeremy
Irvine was the young actor. Yeah.
And Joaquin Cosio, a wonderful stage actor from Mexico City, played in it, and certain actors from Spain. It was a wonderful experience.